the best he could. The fact, because at the time I had a speech problem and everything, I was not able to conduct myself in interviews. He tried to be my voice.
The unfolding relationship between father and son added an unexpected layer of tension and emotional richness to the film. As Matty demonized Arnold, he wore his son down.
There's only one thing in mind, and that's to beat that German. We've got to beat Arnold. He's been up there too long. You waited 9 years for this shot, right?
Be careful, he's gonna try every trick. If he sees you look a little better, he's gonna try and do something. He's gonna try to make you look bad out there. Watch every move he makes. Try not to engage in conversation with him.
And most of the time I really wanted to say, let me speak for myself, let me be who I am, please. You know, this is not how I want to conduct myself. This is not how I want to be in the film.
Look out. That's right. That's it. No. Down here, Louis.
I was not really me. I was beaten down.
Pump it up, pump it iron.
As Butler filmed and shaped his material, blending fact with fiction, the characters emerged as types, heightened versions of themselves. The self-invented, charismatic winner and the self-conscious, desperate underdog. Butler also honed his secondary characters, the bully, the family man, the master poser. Arnold's friend Franco Columbu was not so easily defined. So in 1975, the crew traveled to his tiny homeland in Sardinia to see what might happen. Not much did, except one of the more memorable moments of the film.
My town is 2,000 people when they're all in town. And of a sudden, the crew comes there to film my parents and little things I did in the town. And there was nothing to do in the town. I could only walk and lift a car. And that's what I did. I could think, I said, what could I do for the camera? Lift a car. My father was watching. Say, that's my son, he lifts cars, you know?
Another memorable moment was the infamous T-shirt incident, when Ken Waller, in an attempt to fluster his opponent Mike Katz, hides his T-shirt.
You see a blue T-shirt around?
In reality, the filmmakers made it more than it was.
The thing about my part of it, like, you have to have a good guy and a bad guy to make something to the movie.
Hey, you know what I'm gonna do when I get to Africa? I'm gonna take Katz's shirt, I'm gonna hide it.
I hid the T-shirt, yeah.
We knew that Waller had taken Katz's T-shirt, and we did follow that up.
You know, back then, that sort of was my nature in a way, but it was all in joking. I considered Mike a friend. A friend of yours, you really don't want to hurt their feelings. At that time, I didn't ever think it was going to come out and be a big deal on a movie screen. So you learn later. I would go to contests after that, and I'd get booed because of what was said in that movie.
And then there was Schwarzenegger himself. While already supremely confident, he made it a point to pump up his persona while the cameras were rolling.
I played the kind of Germanic machine that comes over from over there, like a machine, nothing will stop him.
I have to cut my emotions off and be kind of cold.
No emotions, no feelings.
I want to be the best, and I'm perfectly willing to go through anything to be the best.
Anything to psych out his opponents, trying to chip away at their confidence, laughing all the while.
I'm not nervous at all.
I tried anything and everything to sometimes look like, this evil guy.
Franco is pretty smart, but Franco is a child.
For me, it was like, I don't care. It was like, it doesn't matter what he says. When I'm on stage, I'm going to show that I'm the best. And I'm still convinced I was at least as good as Arnold on the stage that night of the Olympia, or maybe a little bit better. It doesn't matter if he wins or I win.
To be honest with you, he was cocky.
To be perfect, it's one of the hardest things to be, you know?
He had a right to be.
Of course you were competitive. Of course, when it came down to the pose-off, and when it came down to who brings the best body in, on the day of the competition, yeah, I was the most competitive. But now, since I'm wiser and older, I've thought about many times if, like, you know, maybe I went a little overboard. But, you know, that's the way I did it then. That was my thinking process then, and, you know, you can't go back and change it. But sometimes I regret it.
In an attempt to soften the edges around Arnold Schwarzenegger, Charles Gaines, the author of the Pumping Iron book, came around to draw Arnold out, get him to warm up emotionally, reveal vulnerability. It didn't work, and it never made the cut.
Scared? Do you ever get scared?
Sure, I get scared.
Of what? What scares you?
The unknown.
He felt like he couldn't get through to me because here I was this kind of one-dimensional guy that was just like made of steel.
Of course they want you to be all wide open. They want to be able to do that you are soft, that you're able to cry, because it puts them in the same boat and they say, well, he's just one of us.
Now, you know what I think you're doing now? I think you're bullshitting now.
No.
I do. I think you're...
What he really didn't realize was not that I was not vulnerable, but that I lived in denial. You know, my whole life. It's always like, whenever I felt, you know, pain or anything like this, it was like I forgot about it. I dismissed it.
For some reason, maybe it has to do with competition, you just clamp down that capacity on yourself. You carry it too far, what it winds up doing is just cutting you off from the possibility of having a really fundamental, reciprocal human relationship with somebody else.
So what?
You don't care about that?
No. And especially since I knew in bodybuilding and in competition, you have to kind of bury things temporarily. The way I dealt with it always is that right now I put it aside and then I deal with it later on, whenever that is, you know.
Always on the front burner, though, was Arnold's ambition, which was on display in another sequence cut from the film. It's Arnold visiting with his idol, retired bodybuilding champ, Reg Park. Arnold was patterning his career after Park, who'd gone on to star in Hercules movies in the 60s.
I think what perhaps happened to me about 15, 20 years ago is happening to you right now.
I know, it's this incredible thing.
The parallel is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like a repetition,
yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I looked up to you so much right from the beginning.
He was a kid wanting to emulate what I'd done, so it was a great compliment to me, and I took it in that sense.
Yeah, I remember in particular this one dream, because I felt like I was dreaming for 8 hours, I mean, the whole night. And it was just, it was like, you know, me being a king and staying on top of a mountain, and there was no room left for anybody else up there, okay? Just for me. I mean, the whole thing was so much like, you know, a victory dream.
The time had come. The Pumping Iron team had shot every scene they could to set up their characters at home. Now it was time to go where they were always headed, halfway around the world to the Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe contest in Pretoria, South Africa. There'd be no more manipulated outcomes, no setting up scenes. The film crew would now be observers, not participants anymore. The competition was the real thing, and everyone would be playing to win.
It was tremendous adventure in those days. You want to go to Africa to make a movie about Arnold Schwarzenegger competing in the first multiracial contest in South Africa, then let's go to South Africa and do it. I mean, we were doing this by the seat of our pants.
A revolution in technology, much like today's digital camera revolution, allowed the crew to shoot with more mobile, handheld 16mm film cameras. With unprecedented access to the bodybuilders, the filmmakers set out to uncover the drama that was taking place behind the scenes.
I think that the wonderful part about the film was that we didn't really feel, because of our comfort and trust in the people that did the film, that the cameras were even rolling. So I think you got that real honest, down-to-earth kind of emotions and feelings.
Roger Walker, Australia.
There's a moment in the film in which you can almost see me on stage taking the shoulders of Joan Churchill, the camera woman, and just turning the camera like this onto Mike Katz at the moment he lost. And then we just followed him downstairs.
You know, as I look back on that, and I've seen it many times, I think most of us, many of us, will draw into ourselves and into our families in times of need. And I think ultimately, I just went back and wanted to know how my son was doing.
Here's a head slate. We're going in to see Katz. And I could, you know, usually I could say, look what I got, Michael, you know, and I put it around his neck, or I give him the trophy for his room. And now I'm away from him for 10 days. And I come home with nothing. You know, I'll tell you, no matter what happens to me in the sport, I always got them. And that's something great to come home to.
It was a way that I could try to gather myself together with such a disappointment. It was at that point, it was a very, very big disappointment in my life. So I kind of gathered my strength from my family, yeah.
When the Mr. Universe part of the competition was over, Waller had won. Next up, the main event, Mr. Olympia, with Arnold, Lou, and Franco all in the running. The film crews got into position.
I was aware that there was going to be a marvelous confrontation between Arnold and Louis in the pump-up room. It was setting up the most wonderful opportunity for Arnold to do everything that he is capable of doing. The psyching part of bodybuilding, which is quite famous because of that scene and some others, is something that Arnold really does.
I love it, Louis. You just keep me entertained in the serious moments.
The room we were in was only probably about 20 feet by 20 feet. I mean, it was this very small room. And you talk about a lot of tension, a lot of heat. So you can't help being, you know, kind of on the edgy side.
The only thing that's left is Arnold's bullshit. That's why I'm up here, Arnold. See? I'm not wearing boots.
Lou, what do you think your chances are today?
I'm gonna lose, Arnold. You're the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just wanted to do insurance. Everything is under control here. Beautiful.
You're gonna be king a long time, Arnold. You're gonna be king a long time.
Thank you.
More than 25 years later, Ferrigno recalls his feelings that night.
I came out in the prejudging. I realized that I was not going to come second. There's a chance I'm going to come third. And I'm looking at the audience, I can see my father's face. I was just, oh my God. It's like, because he was more disappointed than I was.
Third place, Lou Ferrigno.
I'll tell you something, what that boy of yours has done in a year, it's fantastic.
We try,
You
did a
keep
good job.
going.
Don't kid yourself.
Very wonderful job.
Oh, we'll say.
Wonderful
Did a good job.
Wonderful job.
I knew that I was going to retire.
And I would like to announce officially that I'm retiring from bodybuilding competition.
That was my chance. But you know, history is history. Being in South Africa, what I really wanted more than anything was not really being Mr. Olympia, was being out in the open and having a good time like Arnold. That's what I want more than anything. That was more impressive to me. Who wanted to be in South Africa, come second, come third, to be 10th? You were down there having fun, schmoozing with people, shaking hands. That's what I'm doing now because it's taken me many years to see that. But that was my envision. When I saw that, that's the direction I wanted to go. For me to change that, I had to work on myself.
The film was in the can, but now there was more than 100 hours of it to be cut down and crafted into a movie. Unfortunately, Butler was broke, having maxed out on his credit cards.
After I got back from Africa, I got a call every single day of the week from American Express because I'd succeeded in running up a $35,000 bill, and I had become their most important client. I was rather impressed with myself.
Out of desperation in 1976, they concocted an outlandish scheme. They put on a bodybuilding show at the prestigious Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City to try and attract potential backers.
We invited Candy Bergen to photograph Arnold. The Whitney thought we might get 300 people, and someone said, you know, there's a pretty big crowd outside.
I know, isn't it? You seen this crowd out there?
No, I haven't looked out there.
It's big.
And I went down and looked, and there were 5,000 people outside trying to get in.
Nobody's gonna go in until we get a line here.
Inside the museum, Arnold, Frank Zane, and Ed Corney were rotated on a turntable in front of the New York City art crowd.
It was very sort of high concept idea.
It was a risky scheme, and it was a long, long way from Venice Beach. Moderated by New York Times critic Vicki Goldberg, the event brought together some of the most prominent art historians in the world. to watch bodybuilding.
We're talking about a subject which is fascinating and quite present before our eyes a lot of the time. That is to say, the representation of the muscular body in art.
The next bodybuilder who's coming out doesn't need an introduction to a lot of you, but he does to a lot more of you. As I said before, he's the greatest bodybuilder in the history of the sport, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And then we had this discussions about, what is bodybuilding in compared to what art was, and how did, Leonardo da Vinci and Rodin and all those guys come up with those muscles when they painted and sculpted muscular bodies.
The Whitney couldn't control the event because there were too many people there, so that instead of taking the money and putting it in a cash register, they had to throw the money into a pile on the floor.
Hey, move down, 2 lines, okay?
There was a 6-foot-high pile of $5 bills, and at the end of the day, the movie was financed, and the rest is history.
The Whitney Museum event proved to investors that the general public just might be interested in bodybuilding. Now, it was time to present Pumping Iron to the world.
Pumping up.
On January 18th, 1977, Pumping Iron premiered at New York's Plaza Theater.
Feels like flying.
Arnold and his friends were now the toast of New York City. Audiences loved the film, and critics gave it rave reviews.
Pumping up, pumping up.
But for the bodybuilders, it was a surreal experience seeing their private world revealed on the big screen.
It was comical to us to see some of the things that come out in that movie. I was a bad guy, and back then I thought that was that was all right.
When I saw it for the first time, it made me very angry because I suddenly saw how it was portrayed.
Calm him down. Help him.
I was afraid people wouldn't like me. I was afraid people were going to look down on me. Because the fact that here's a kid from Brooklyn, he's deaf, he can't speak, he looks dumb in the film. What I'm trying to say to you is at the time, I felt like a freak. But it wasn't like that. I didn't realize that within time, everyone embraced me. People come up and say, God, I love you in Pumping Iron, I love you and Arnold.
All right.
Nothing to say, I just want to eat my cake.
Pumping up.
It was so incredible to see the film on the big screen. And at the end of the film, when we were sitting in the bus going back and Arnold was joking with Lou, it was almost like breathing out, saying, now we can relax.
In a way, it was naive. It was a wonderful opportunity to just hang out together, train together, and be really part of a family that continues to be close and friendly to this day.
We all stuck together and had fun doing it.
There was a certain kind of a unity there and a certain kind of a camaraderie that was unlike anything else.
And that's why when you look at it today, there's nothing else like Pumping Iron.
Here we are 25 years later celebrating it, so we must have done something right.
So how you feel today, Laurie?
I feel better.
Today, Dr. Franco Colombo is a practicing chiropractor in Los Angeles.
Narrowing of cervical 6, 7, and 8.
He also produces and stars in low-budget films that he shoots in Sardinia. To this day, he and Arnold are best friends. Mike Katz is a judge for the International Federation of Bodybuilding and owns several world gyms in Connecticut where he trains up-and-coming bodybuilders. His son, Mike Jr., and his wife recently had a baby. Mike Katz is a grandfather. Ken Waller lives in Los Angeles. He has seen Gold's, the tiny seaside gym he once managed, evolve into a worldwide enterprise.
What you doing, big guy? You show up.
His focus now is on raising his son.
Let's go talk about winning that medal, huh?
As a sales manager at Extreme Activewear, the company that prints Gold's merchandise, he now has all the t-shirts he can get his hands on. Joe Weider and his brother Ben continued promoting bodybuilding through their publishing empire and through the IFBB. What was once a subculture is now a multi-million-dollar business. Ed Corney works in the fitness industry. He has had some health problems recently, but promises that even from a wheelchair, he can still outpose anyone from the old days. George Butler went on to direct Pumping Iron 2, The Women. He recently directed 2 documentaries on the life of Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton. The films have earned rave reviews. Lou Ferrigno went on to a career in film and television, most notably starring as the Incredible Hulk. He's also a trainer to Hollywood stars and one of the most famous names in the health and fitness industry.
I'm still waiting to eat my cake. Remember that line?
Matty Ferrigno retired to Florida and says he's very proud of his son. As for Arnold Schwarzenegger, he went on to make a few bucks in the movie business.
Every time anyone sees Pumping Iron, they will come away, loving the movie, getting inspired by the movie, but at the same time they're asking themselves, wow, was all of this stuff true? Was it really, did Arnold really psych out Lou Ferrigno? Did he really not go home to his father's funeral because it was just shortly before a competition? And was he really that cold that he said, well, forget that, he's dead already. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to just focus in on my competition. Is that true? I saw him hanging there afterwards, a celebration party after the Mr. Olympia, smoking a joint. Did he really smoke a joint? And did he, in fact, inhale? Is that true? Was it true that they stole Mike Katz's T-shirt? Was really the psyching out that he was doing on Lou Ferrigno, was that true? So they're walking out with a lot of questions. And so when I go around the country and promote the movie, for instance, even the 25th anniversary, when the film started playing on HBO, on Cinemax, a lot of journalists called me and says, oh, I just saw this for the first time, and asked me about all those questions. So I think it's important to clarify that there's certain things in this movie that were true, like the competition, the outcome of the competition, the training, the severity of the training, the severity of the pain, the sacrifices that needed to be made, the amount of hours we spent in the gym, the food supplements we had to take, the food that we had to eat all the time, the pounds of meat and all those kind of things. All of that is true. But there were certain things that are not true. And that's why we never call it a documentary, we call it always a docudrama, because certain things were created in order to make it more interesting. Because it was very clear to us that the only way we could raise the money for the movie, for our Pumping Iron, was by making it more dramatic. All the investors always said, look, the training is terrific, what they are doing is terrific and all this, but how much can we look at this footage of them doing squats and chin-ups and sit-ups and all this? It's boring. Even though exciting to them, but it's boring to us to watch. So therefore, let's create some drama, some conflict. Let's create a villain. Let's create a hero. Let's create the guy that has the psychological power over people. Let's create the guy, the guys that fall for it and they wipe out because of it. Let's have guys pulling tricks on each other in the gym when they're training, when they're 500 pounds on the back. What can they do to each other? Those are the kind of things I like to see. This is what the investors said. So we started creating those kind of moments as we went along. And we had 100 hours of footage that we created during the whole shooting of Pumping Iron, and then edited down to around 85 or 90 minutes. And so there we could take things in such a way that makes it then appear like I was psyching him out.
I watch you.
I watch you too.
Oh, the barbell above my head.
I adapted as time went on, and I saw that Lou Ferrigno could not be what was in the original intention, to make him the villain, the big guy that weighs 280 pounds, that trains secretly in a dark room in New York and works himself up to this machine, to this Hulk, and then comes to South Africa and beats the little Schwarzenegger, wipes him off the stage. That really didn't happen. They thought it would happen, or that it could happen. But then they found out that he's actually a very vulnerable guy, that he has a hearing problem, that he needs his father's assistance a lot of times, that he was a big guy, but he did not have the kind of a presence that would make him look like an evil guy that wants to come and destroy me. So slowly we changed the whole thing and actually made him the victim and made me the guy that pulls the tricks on him and that wipes out the competition year after year. And the more I got into that, the more I started playing that machine. And I said to myself, how can I sell the idea that I'm a machine that has no emotions, that doesn't care about any of my competitors, not even my best friend that was living with me at the time, Franco Colombo. I could care less about him. He, as I said in the movie, is just a child. And on the day of the competition, I will become his father. I say that was, the reality was, I love Franco and I helped him as much. Even if it meant that he would win the competition, I would help him all the way. He was my friend, but in order to sound cold and to sound like calculated and like a machine, I played out this role. And I played out the role that what I would do with Lou Ferrigno. We created the things that I would psych him out. I created a scene just before the prejudging where I sat down with his father, with his mother, and with Lou Ferrigno. We all sat down. And there I was to this whole big psych out job, telling him that I already called my mother. And she congratulated me. I told her I won 6 times Mr. Olympia. I said, she congratulated me. I said, you see, because I'm going to win later on, no matter what. And the reality of it is that, you know, I loved Lou. And there was no reason to do a psych out job on him, because I felt 100% that I'm going to win the competition, because he was just not there at this level yet of competing. He was not ready yet to win the competition, so therefore there was no reason to psych him out. But we wanted to play it that he's really dangerous. He could wipe me out. He's huge. He's gigantic. And I have to now not only use the body, but I have to use the psychology. And I have to psych the father out, I have to psych the mother out, I have to psych Lou Ferrigno out, and I do this whole thing. And so throughout the movie, we established that kind of a relationship. So there was another thing that we did in order to really make me be different than the other guys.
If you want to be a champion, you cannot have any kind of an outside negative force coming in and affect you. So therefore, I have to cut my emotions off and be kind of cold in a way.
Then we wanted to sell the idea of how cold I am really, and how I have no emotions. For instance, now I took a story that I actually heard in France, one bodybuilder one time tell me, 4 years before, a story about how he never went home to his father's funeral before a competition. How his father died and he just ignored it. And he says, yeah, he had to stay focused. So I stole that story. And I said to myself, I have to say that story. People will be shocked. People will be writing about it when this movie comes out. And that's how you get, of course, headlines and all those kind of things. And people will write about the movie. That's how we sell the tickets. So I said to myself, that's what I have to say. So I explained that I have no emotions. If someone steals the car right out in front of my house, I would just laugh at it and buy myself a new car. You know, of course, afterwards I said to myself, I said, hey, if someone steals my car, I cry probably because this was my jewel. That was the reality. Then I continued on with the story. And I said, as a matter of fact, my father died one year, just before competition. And my mother called me and I said, are you going to come home to the funeral? And I said to her, why? He's dead already. So I acted really totally cold, and people, it really worked. People were shocked about this. Some of them were appalled by this. And so, of course, since then, I've been getting those questions. Is this true? Is this not true? I mean, did your father really happen? The reality of it is that it never happened. My father never died before any competition. He died 3 months after a competition in 1972, and I saw him just shortly before he died. And we had a fantastic relationship. So there was none of that, of not having any emotions, not caring of my father dying. So that's the reality. So I think people, now it is important for people to know what is the reality.
Wow.
There is an opposite example is, for instance, with smoking the joint. I smoked the marijuana in the movie, an ant. And a lot of people ask me, says, did you really smoke a marijuana in this movie, or was it just fake? I said, no, I really smoked it. And I also inhaled, unlike some people claim.
You didn't see a blue T-shirt around? Waller had it?
The other question that people always ask me, Mike Katz was looking for his T-shirt in the movie. Did, in fact, everyone play a trick on him and steal his T-shirt or hide his T-shirt to confuse him and therefore lose the competition? The reality of it is that he did look for the T-shirt at one point just because he's misplaced it, but no one was hiding it. But after we saw this footage, we went out and shot additional footage to create a scene where a bunch of bodybuilders get together, throw the football, have fun, and then Ken Waller says, you know what I'm going to do to Mike Katz? I'm going to hide his T-shirt. As a matter of fact, I'm going to hide his bathing suit. I'm going to hide everything.
Hey, you know what I'm going to do when I get to Africa? I'm going to take Katz's shirt, I'm going to hide it. Mess his mind up a little bit.
So that football scene was actually shot way after the competition was over. And we have had all the footage already, just in order to create this scene of the Mike Katz getting his T-shirt stolen by Ken Waller, and that he messed up his mind, so he loses the competition. Pain in your muscles and aching, that's what makes actually the muscle then grow. If you can't go through this pain barrier, forget it. One of the most common questions I also get is, you know, did we take steroids? Because now, of course, drugs is such a big issue in sports. And the answer is yes. It was just in the beginning stage because bodybuilders in those days just experimented with it, but it was not illegal. It was like, we talked about it very openly. I mean, anyone that was asked, he says, you take steroids? He says, yeah, I take 3 Dianabol a day. Or someone else would say, I would take this, and that. It was not an illegal thing. Now, after it became a big problem, then our federation said, okay, bodybuilders ought not to take steroids, and there will be testing done. Surprise testing done. You could be called at any given time, and within 2 days you have to do a test, so you can't get rid of the whole thing out of your system or anything like that. So that's what's going on right now. The bodybuilders are tested continuously. It's as satisfying to me as having sex with a woman and coming. People still ask me, for instance, you know, is it true? And they're still trying to find out. Is it in fact true that a pump is better than coming? Because that's what I said in the movie. And the reality, of course, is no, it has nothing to do with one and the other. It feels great to be a champion. It feels great to train. It feels great to pump up in all those things. But how can you compare one with the other? It's 2 different things. You better get both, the pump and the coming. But I mean, the reality is I made up a lot of this stuff because I felt like that's the way you get attention. You have to, I believe that the more sensationalistic that you are, and the more outrageous things that you say, the more you get quoted, the more you get in the papers, and the more the sport of bodybuilding will benefit, because the more stories we will get about the sport of bodybuilding. So that's what it really was all about. We couldn't have made this movie about Arnold Schwarzenegger, about my life or something like that, about my bodybuilding or my drive to win or all this stuff. That would have been boring and it wouldn't have done well. What made this movie successful is because we had so many bodybuilders in the movie that were very colorful. I mean, Lou Ferrigno had a specific part in this movie and it worked so well. People loved this character. Ed Corney, Franco Colombo, I mean, Ken Waller, Mike Katz, Serge Nubret. I mean, there were endless amount of guys that really brought the color and the dimensions to the film, and it made the relationships very interesting. Relationships that were, you know, shown in the movie. A lot of it was true, and some of it was created and made up. But the reality of it is the movie has a lot of real stuff in there. I mean, the real competition, real training, real agony, real defeat, all of those kind of things it has in there.
One and only Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Many people come up to me and say how they were inspired by pumping on. First I heard it about the book, then even 10 times more when the movie came out. They were inspired to train, it changed their lives. They tell you the most unbelievable stories of what impact it had, how it created in them the will to succeed in life and to do something with themselves, if it is in bodybuilding or in other sports or in business. It is amazing the impact the movie had. So I hope that this movie, when people watch this DVD, has the same impact on them as it had on many hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people around the world, which is they walk away and get inspired and jump into the weight room and lift the weights to find out if it's really true what I said. Is a pump better than coming? It's not, trust me.
Cinemax Final Cut presents an exclusive interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, star of the classic documentary Pumping Iron.
I remember that George Butler came to me in 1974 and said, I want to do a documentary about bodybuilding.